Have you ever wondered how we've come to normalize the idea of people returning to their ancestral homeland after 3,000 years, while at the same time demonizing those who had been living there and were forced out from their homes and villages? Because for years, not just you, but Jewish people around the world have been told lie after lie to justify it.
We were conquered by the Romans, we were conquered by the Byzantines. They did a lot of bad things to us, but they didn't really exile us, contrary to what people think. The loss of our land actually occurred when the Arab conquest took place in the 7th century.
What if I told you that by the time Arabs entered Jerusalem in the 7th century, there were no Jews left there? And more importantly, that it is the Arabs who invited them back. And that's not even a disputable historical fact.
The Muslims are the ones who allowed the Jews to return and live in Jerusalem.
I am not familiar with any sources showing the exiling of Jews or others from the land during the Arab conquest, or of any testimonies of such an expulsion. In fact, the opposite.
These are respected Jewish historians. Do you think the Prime Minister of the only Jewish state doesn't know the history of his own people? This wasn't an incidental lie. It's a lie carefully designed to demonize the victim. To make sure that no matter the crimes Israel commits, the children it slaughters, or how often this plays in front of your eyes, you remain incapable of empathy for Palestinians. The lie about Arabs expelling Jews wasn't Netanyahu's first, nor his last.
Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time, he wanted to expel the Jews. And Haj Amin al-Husseini went to Hitler and said, if you expel them, they'll all come here. So what should I do with them? He asked. He said, burn them.
A lie so obvious, so offensive, that even a pathological liar like Netanyahu had to retract it. Nor was he the only Israeli leader to lie. They all have from the very, very start. And on the 78th anniversary of the creation of Israel, it is time to expose these lies, so you know that Israel's history is not much different than the brutal present the world is finally seeing. You've heard many times that Israel accepted partition, that it wanted peace with its Arab neighbors, but that is a lie.
After the formation of a large army in the wake of the establishment of the state, we will abolish partition and expand to the whole of Palestine.
That is a direct quote from David Ben-Gurion, Israel's founding father and its first prime minister. He said this in a meeting of the Jewish Executive Agency in 1938. That was 10 years before the so-called Arab attack on the Jewish state. Could he have changed his mind? No, it was, according to his own words, a strategy, a very effective one.
The establishment of a state, even if only on a portion of the land, is the maximal reinforcement of our strength at the present time and a powerful boost to our historical endeavors to liberate the entire country.
A strategy that he and other major leaders of the Zionist movement agreed on.
We shall spread in the whole country in the course of time. This is only an arrangement for the next 25 to 30 years.
That's Chaim Weizmann, Israel's first president, and he wrote that in a letter to the British High Commissioner, again, back in 1938. In fact, in 1948, the Palestinians did not want to fight.
While the Palestinians were trying to maintain calm in the country, the Haganah did all it could to escalate the situation.
Yes, that's from the British High Commissioner. And that wasn't even controversial. Israeli leaders knew this reality very well.
I believe the majority of Palestinian masses accept the partition as a fait accompli. They don't believe it is possible to overcome or reject it. The decisive majority of them do not want to fight us.
So why was there a war? Because these Zionist leaders didn't just want part of the land. They didn't want all land either. They wanted it all empty of Palestinians.
The total population of the Jewish state at the time of its establishment will be about 1 million, including almost 40% non-Jews. Such a population composition does not provide a stable basis for a Jewish state. There can be no stable and strong Jewish state so long as it has a Jewish majority of only 60%.
And their solution for this was ethnic cleansing.
We must expel the Arabs and take their places, and if we have to use force to guarantee our own right to settle in those places, then we have force at our disposal.
To achieve that, they started provoking the Palestinians.
Actions such as the one in Al-Qisas will prompt quiet Arabs to act against us.
Our actions against Qisas ignited the Galilee, and this was a good thing.
They knew the Palestinians didn't want to fight, but they started provoking them, terrorizing them, so they could ethnically cleanse them.
It is impossible to expel 114,000 people who lived in the Galilee without terror. There had to have been an element of initial terror for them to leave.
They did it through massacres all over Palestine, in Tantura.
השתוללו בטנטורה, זה היה משהו נורא. טנטורה היה כפר עשיר, בתים יפים, גרים כמו אירופאים, אתה יודע, וגם אנשים היו לבושות ויפה, ובאמת היה כפר... אחד אנס שם איזה ילדה בת 16, משהו כזה. אתה מבין? אבל זה מכוער מאוד, והשתיקו את הדבר הזה. והיו חבר'ה שלקחו את הלוויורים, ורדפו אחרי חבר'ה ושרפו אותם. זה היה משהו זוועתי, וזה אסור לספר, אני לא אדבר על זה, כי זה יכול להיות סקנדל שלם מהעניין הזה.
In Safsaf.
In Safsaf, after the inhabitants had raised a white flag, the soldiers collected and separated the men and women, tied the hands of 50-60 Falahin peasants, and shot and killed them and buried them in a pit. Also, they raped several women.
In Al-Dawaima.
Cultured officers had turned into base murderers, and this not in the heat of battle, but out of a system of expulsion and destruction. The less Arabs remained, the better. This principle is the political motor for the expulsions and the atrocities.
In Haifa.
This British intelligence report describes the attack on Haifa. There was considerable congestion outside the East Gate of hysterical and terrified Arab women and children and old people, on whom the Jews opened up on mercilessly with fire.
And in the infamous Deir Yassin.
I saw cut-off genitalia and women's crushed stomachs. It was direct murder. Soldiers shot everyone they saw, including women and children. Parents begged commanders to stop the slaughter, to please stop shooting.
יושבים בחדר, משפחה, אתה זורק פנימה רימון, אז מה הפלא שהרימון קורע אותם? זה היה דבר נורא.
עד היום לא אשכח את זה. היה שם עץ גדול, והיה קשור אליו בחור ערבי, והעץ הזה היה אחרי שריפה. צרפו. קשרו אותו וצרפו.
There was a feeling of considerable slaughter, and it was hard for me to explain it to myself as having been done in self-defense. My impression was more of a massacre than anything else. If it is a matter of killing innocent civilians, then it can be called a massacre.
הם לקחו והעמידו 10-15 ערבים בשורה ליד קיר, גברים, נשים וטף, וירו בהם ככה.
You can hear directly from the Irgun commander at Deir Yassin explain why they did it with such brutality.
רוצה לשמוע את האמת? עד היום. האף שלי בשמיים. ב9 לאפריל נכבשה דיר יאסין. וכולם התחילו לברוח. מדוע הם צעקו דיר יאסין עלינה? הם ברחו מחיפה, ברחו מיפו, ברחו מכל... הכל בגלל דיר יאסין. דיר יאסין עלינה, הפחד של דיר יאסין. לו היו אז עוד 3-4 דיר יאסינים בארץ ישראל, לא נשאר אף ערבי אחד בארץ. ממה את חושבת כל הפליטים האלה במדינות? בלבנון, בירדן, בסוריה, ממה? בגלל מי? אני יודעת בגלל מי? יש יהודי אחד שיכול להגיד זה בגללו. אני פיקדתי על דיר יאסין.
Do you need more evidence on who was the oppressor and who was the victim? Because there is. All of this was the result of direct orders from David Ben-Gurion.
We walked outside, Ben-Gurion accompanying us. Alton repeated his question, what is to be done with the population? David Ben-Gurion waved his hand in a gesture which said, drive them out.
That's a testimony from future Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who was personally involved in the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. And David Ben-Gurion didn't just order the ethnic cleansing, he even ordered the brutality against women and children.
We need to harm them without mercy, women and children included. Otherwise, this is not an effective reaction. During the operation, there is no need to distinguish between guilty and not guilty.
And he knew all the gruesome details as soldiers perpetrated his vision.
Battalion 22 arrested the man and woman. They killed the man, washed her, and then 22 men gang raped her.
And this was not a random incident. Here is what hardcore Zionist historian Benny Morris said when asked about how many rape cases took place in 1948.
In Acre, 4 soldiers raped a girl and murdered her and her father. In Jaffa, soldiers of the Kiryati Brigade raped 1 girl and tried to rape several more. At Hunin, which is in the Galilee, 2 girls were raped and then murdered. There were 1 or 2 cases of rape at Tamtura, south of Haifa. There was 1 case of rape at Kula in the center of the country. At the village of Abu Shusha near Kibbutz Geza, there were 4 female prisoners, 1 of whom was raped a number of times, and there were other cases. Usually more than 1 soldier was involved. Usually there were 1 or 2 Palestinian girls. In a large proportion of the cases, the event ended with murder. Because neither the victims nor the rapists like to report these events, we have to assume that the dozen cases of rape that were reported, which I found, are not the whole story. They are just the tip of the iceberg.
When a New York Times reporter discovered one of the massacres, David Ben-Gurion did exactly what Israeli leaders do today when the IDF is caught red-handed. First, he denied it, and then issued a public apology saying it was a mistake. But 3 months later, he included the bombing that resulted in the murder of 5 Palestinian children in a list of successful operations. Of course, Israeli leaders considered it successful. You heard the Israeli commander at Deir Yassin explain why. But now, hear from Menachem Begin, who became Israel's prime minister in 1977. In 1948, Begin was the leader of the Irgun, the Jewish terrorist group that committed many of those massacres.
Panic overwhelmed the Arabs of Eretz Israel. The legend of Deir Yassin helped us in particular in the saving of Tiberias and the conquest of Haifa. All the Jewish forces proceeded to advance through Haifa like a knife through butter. The Arabs began fleeing in panic, shouting, Deir Yassin! Deir Yassin!
These horror stories didn't spread organically. Here is Yagal alone, commander of the Balmach, Israel's elite forces, explaining how they used a tactic called whisper propaganda to ensure that tens of thousands of Arabs would flee in fear.
And I asked them to whisper in the ears of several Arabs that a giant Jewish reinforcement had reached the Galilee and were about to clean out the villages of Hula, and to advise them as friends to flee while they could.
But remember what Israel's leaders told the world.
Their lands, I don't see the reason why they left their lands. We didn't compel them to leave. They left on their own will, or rather on the will of the Arab leaders.
A lie their supporters continue to repeat to this day.
The Arabs said, leave your homes, and then, when the war's over, you're going to come back and take everything.
Just like the lie that Israel wanted peace in 1948, while Arab countries attacked the infant Jewish state. The Deir Yassin massacre, for example, was on April 9, 1948. Do you know when the Arab armies declared war? May 15, 1948. Only weeks later, after its horror stories had reached Arab capitals from Palestinian refugees. In fact, if you read the Arab League statement in May 1948, it clearly stated that these massacres are the reason they entered the war, to protect the defenseless Palestinian population.
The events which have taken place in Palestine have unmasked the aggressive intentions and the imperialistic designs of the Zionists, including the atrocities committed by them against the peace-loving Arab inhabitants, especially in Deir Yassin, Tiberias, and others.
But Israel and its supporters often describe the Arab rejection of partition as a desire for war. But this too is a lie. The Arabs were pushing for a democratic state with protection for all religions. They were making a simple argument. How can 55% of the territory be given to the Jewish state when the Jewish people only own 7% of the land? That wasn't an unreasonable stance at the time. In fact, both George Marshall, the US Secretary of State, and James Forstall, the Secretary of Defense, were against the partition. But Truman infamously said,
"I have to answer to hundreds of thousands who are anxious for the success of Zionism. I do not have hundreds of thousands of Arabs among my constituents."
While the Arabs were pursuing the diplomatic path, the Zionist leaders wanted the war.
We will be able to not only defend ourselves, but also to inflict death blows on the Syrians in their own country and take over Palestine as a whole. We can face all the Arab forces. This is not a mystical belief, but a cold and rational calculation based on practical examination.
They even killed the UN peace mediator, Count Folke Bernadotte, because peace would have put an end to their ethnic cleansing project. The order was given by a leader of another Jewish terrorist group, the Lihi. Like Begin, Yitzhak Shamir also went on to become Prime Minister of Israel, and he famously said,
"I did what I had to do. I have no regrets and I have no apologies."
Since when does someone who seeks peace kill the mediator? These leaders presented the war as an existential threat to Jews, that the Arabs were attacking Israel because they're anti-Semitic, to get world Jewry to blindly support the Zionist cause, a tactic they use to this day. But in their closed chambers, these leaders knew it was not anti-Semitism.
What cause have we to complain about their fierce hatred for us? For 8 years now, they sit in their refugee camps in Gaza, and before their eyes, we turn into our homestead the land and villages in which they and their forefathers have lived.
Moshe Dayan was talking about stealing actual Palestinian homes. Israelis didn't just steal land from Palestinians. They took homes, their furniture, their belongings. And they did all of this in the most brutal way possible. Today, many Jewish people are deeply offended if anyone compares Israeli actions to those of the Nazis. But that's how their own soldiers described their behavior.
Where did they come by such a measure of cruelty, like Nazis? Is there no more humane way of expelling the inhabitants than by such methods?
It's telling that even for that Israeli soldier, the goal of ethnic cleansing wasn't seen as a problem. It just should have been carried out more humanely. And it wasn't just young soldiers that compared IDF actions to those of the Nazis.
I couldn't sleep all night. I felt that things that were going on were hurting my soul, the soul of my family, and all of us here. Now Jews too have behaved like Nazis, and my whole being is shaken.
All of these crimes were not a secret back then.
When a real and final catastrophe should befall us in Palestine, the first responsible for it would be the British, and the second responsible for it, the terrorist organizations built up from our own ranks. I am not willing to see anybody associated with those misled and criminal people.
The criminal people Albert Einstein is referring to here are the Irgun and the Lihi, the Jewish terrorist groups whose leaders Israelis later elected as prime ministers. Begin and Shamir also founded the Likud, the party that Benjamin Netanyahu now leads. After all the lies and manipulation, the world doesn't know any of this. They only know this infamous quote from Golda Meir.
When the peace comes, we will perhaps in time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our sons, but it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their sons. Peace will come when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us.
Suggesting that Arabs hate Jews more than they love their own children is another lie, designed not just to hide Israel's crimes, but to demonize their victims. Are there any other people in history who suffered this level of brutality and then watched the world sympathize more with their oppressors? They define Zionism as Jewish people's right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland, and that opposing it is anti-Semitic. That framing is designed to manipulate you, because no one has the right to commit a crime. You have the right to live, but can you then use that right to justify killing someone, harvesting their heart, because you need a transplant to live? Because that's exactly what they did. Rape, the murder of innocent civilians, the destruction of entire villages, even the killing of children was all allowed to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians and create the Jewish state. How is opposing a crime anti-Semitic? Crimes they continue to this day, crimes they always knew they will have to commit. Listen to Lord Jacob Rothschild explain why his family found the Balfour Declaration unsatisfactory.
This letter comes out as a rather compromising letter. I mean, the essential point is there for the Jewish community to fasten on to. You have the first bit, which promises a national home rather than the national home, and then you have the bit that nothing that's to be done should in any way harm the Arab community.
Compromising, because it didn't allow them to harm the Arab community. And that was in 1917, before the formation of the PLO, Hamas, and Hezbollah, even before most Palestinians understood what was being planned against them. They knew they would need to harm the Arab community to create the Jewish state, because Palestinians won't leave their land.
Never in history, or I think there will be a nation that gives up its land of its own volition.
And now they're saying you're anti-Semitic if you don't accept what they do to empty the land of Palestinians. And this isn't about history, because they're doing it again now, but this time in front of your eyes, with more brutality and more impunity. They've destroyed 80% of Gaza, blocking humanitarian aid, raping prisoners, dropping 2,000-pound bombs on families in refugee camps, hospitals, universities, mosques, and churches, shooting civilians for sport, journalists, aid workers, medics, even targeting children. And opposing it is not anti-Semitism. Refusing that your tax dollars continue to fund this is not anti-Semitism. Asking questions of your politicians who enable this is not anti-Semitism. And demanding justice for Palestinians is not anti-Semitism. Have empathy for Palestine now.